Hey, how's it going?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's going good. How about you?
I've been good. Trying to keep keep it real, keep it together. Yeah. So what's going on with
Well, it's
you?
my first time on a podcast, so thanks a lot for having me.
Really? Okay, cool, man. No pressure now. It's not like something like an interrogation. And what kind of research do you do?
Well, I would describe myself as a neuroethologist, which means that I study behavior and how it's created by the nervous system. So it's a branch of neuroscience. Um, so until this summer, I was out in Japan where I was studying insects, primarily butterflies. Just moved to Edinburgh a couple months ago, and thinking about what my next step will be.
All right, that's pretty interesting. So you do a lot of work with butterflies, or primarily most of the research was centered on about how butterflies see and how they, navigate between different types of flowers and stuff. Do you want to expand
Yeah,
on that?
that's right. Sure, yeah. So, I mean, we're a vision lab, so we look mostly at the eyes and the brains of butterflies and how they process visual information. Um, so, a lot of our work was to do with color, because butterflies can see, more colors than we can. We don't know exactly how many colors they can see, but, humans see red, green, and blue fundamentally, if you're not colorblind, that is. Um, Butterflies, we think, can see at least four colors: red, green, blue, and ultraviolet,
All right,
possibly more.
that's quite
Um,
interesting.
so yeah, yeah. So the world looks just so much richer to a butterfly than we can possibly imagine. I mean, it's a lot lower res. Their eyes are not they're not very high acuity, but yeah, they can see this extra information. And on top of that, they can see polarization as well. So that's a property of light which human eyes cannot detect. Um, so some of my recent research was involved in that. How they perceive polarization is a completely it's very different from how we do.
Wow, that's quite fascinating, man. That's pretty good. Um, how are bees related to this?
So yeah, there's a lot of work is done on bees because, well, I guess because they're commercially useful, right? They make honey. Um, Also, they do, really crazy navigation. They're like the smartest insects out there. So a forager will go out, find some flowers, come back to the hive, and then actually communicate the information of where to find the flowers to her nest mates, doing a kind of dance called the waggle dance. This is like a language that they have to communicate with each other. It's fascinating. Um, so people study them in terms of how they can learn things because they're such good learners. But also their vision, their visual learning. But they only see three colors. They're kind of boring compared to the butterflies. So I'd
Okay.
say butterflies are where it's at. If you're interested in vision, particularly butterflies are the place to be.
All right, cool. And I heard a lot of stuff about bees as well, and they seem like ultraviolet, and they can sense electromagnetic waves around them. It's like one of the how they navigate. Is that true?
Well, so we're talking about electromagnetic radiation. I mean, light, the normal light that we can see is electromagnetic radiation.
Yeah.
And of course, they can see that. But, they can also, yeah, there was some recent work showing that they could detect electrical charges on flowers. This is really crazy stuff. So
Wow.
they can actually tell whether a flower has, lots of nectar for them to drink or whether it's been emptied by another bee already by sensing how charged it is. That was just a couple of years ago that research came out, and I didn't believe it at first because it just seems so nuts, but apparently they can.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. Um, and where do you think that all this information and data gathered will be applied to in nature or in real life? How beneficial is this information?
So you're talking about the applications of the research, yeah?
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
I mean, this is a question. This question I get asked a lot, and I'm never quite sure how to answer it because, on the one hand, I was, a pure biologist, a pure scientist.
Right.
So I was just focused on, finding out knowledge for the sake of knowledge kind of thing, whereas other people are more applications focused. But having said that, I think there are applications that one can definitely think about, and when you're writing grant proposals, it's always good to be thinking about how can someone make some money out of this someday.
Yeah.
So one application that we used to talk about quite a bit is for pest control, right? So if you want to keep butterflies off your crops because they lay eggs, the caterpillars eat things. It would be nice if you could do that using light rather than pesticides with all the pollution and concerns that you have there. So if you can understand their visual system, then maybe you can come up with some way to use light as an insect repellent, which would be very environmentally friendly.
All right.
Um, Another application, maybe a slightly kind of sexier one, but one that we were a bit more cautious to talk about. If you want to talk about, drones, unmanned air vehicles,
Yeah.
because if you can think about flying insects and how they sense the world around them, then you can perhaps apply that to making flying robots. And obviously, drones are kind of big news these days.
Oh yeah.
Um, Military, but also they have peaceful civilian uses. You can have search and rescue drones as opposed to search and destroy drones. Um,
Yeah.
so some people I knew, I'm not going to name any names, but they would get funding from the U.S. Air Force to do the kind of work they were doing. Um, so like one collaboration, and I should point out, I'm not saying that these people received money from the U.S. Air Force, but a collaboration I did with some scientists at Cambridge. They were looking at an insect called a killer fly. So
Right.
these things are fascinating. They're flies, and they are ambush predators. So they
Wow.
just sit on a leaf, waiting for like a fruit fly to come along. And when they see one, they just launch themselves at a tremendous rate of acceleration into the air to intercept this thing within 100 milliseconds.
Whoa.
Um, so that's basically a surface to air missile. So if you can work out how they're doing that, then
Oh
you can have
yeah.
some applications.
So there's a wide range of military applications that can come out of this research.
Potentially, but I'm sure the military's 20 years ahead of us. I think they just kind of like to see what us civilians are doing just to make sure we don't accidentally turn up anything too interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, actually. Yeah. All right. That's great. So do you think you can go back and do some more research, or you think there's everything you need to know about it? There's nothing more to know, or maybe study the insect, or what's your next move? Do you have anything in the future in the pipeline or anything?
Well, I mean, it's definitely not. There's nothing left to know. It's like the more questions you answer, the more questions you find. So there's still plenty of work to be done.
Right.
Um, as for me, I don't know. I'm thinking about it. I think maybe I'm going to go freelance, perhaps.
Okay.
Be a kind of a ronin, like a scientist without an
So
affiliation to a university.
right. So like a scientist for hire.
Yeah, I mean,
All right.
some
Like a
people some people are
mercenary.
starting to do this. A
Right.
mercenary, if you like. Um, I've got one or two friends who've done that. Sort of startup companies to provide services to scientists, and because my background is actually computer science, I'm a coder. Artificial intelligence was my degree,
Right.
so I'm kind of an unusual biologist. I'm kind of a computer geek pretending to be a biologist. But
Oh
that's
yeah.
quite a useful skill to have because I may not be the best coder in the world, but I'm probably the best coder in a biology department. So
Right.
if I could be kind of that interface between computer science and biology, that's maybe a little niche that I can have for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. What about artificial intelligence? Do you see any potential in that when it comes to insects, some sort of interface or something like that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, of course, neural interfaces are something that people are pretty interested in, and I mean, the reason I got into insects in the first place, I started off doing human psychology and things, but we're never going to understand the human brain in my lifetime. the most complex object in the known universe. So insects are
Yeah.
a good place to kind of practice these things. A fruit fly brain is 1 million times smaller in terms of neurons than a human
Wow.
brain.
That's
So
crazy.
I would imagine, if you're going to make a neural prosthesis, it would be substantially easier to make that for an insect than it would be for a human. And people have already made these like remote control cockroaches. They
All
put
right.
some implant on a cockroach, and they could stimulate its motor neurons. They could make it, walk forward, turn left, turn right. It's
Wow.
um it's quite crude. It's not sophisticated control, but it's a proof of concept.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's definite possibilities there.
Right. Right.
Again, whether there's much market for that, I don't know. But maybe if you could have little cockroaches acting like flies on the wall as spies, maybe that's something else the military might be interested in. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, that's really fascinating. Uh, I think the last time we spoke, you mentioned something about when you were doing experiments on butterflies, you actually inserted like little electrodes into the in the brain or connected to the eye or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I didn't do that personally because I'm not an electrophysiologist. So
Right.
my work was mostly behavioral and also a
Okay.
bit of kind of computer simulation modeling. But yeah, my colleagues, my lab mates, some of them were very skilled electrophysiologists. So that means that yeah, they stick electrodes into the neurons or well, the brains anyway of insects and record their activity. So you present a stimulus, you show some wavelength of light or something, and you measure the response that you get from that neuron. And by doing that in a systematic way, you can map out what exactly this neuron is coding for. What does it mean when it fires. Um, so yeah, I mean that's a lot of the work that my lab did, although not me personally.
All right. Okay. That's pretty interesting. Yeah. Um, butterflies. Now, there's so many different varieties of them. Do they all have the same fundamental sort of core, basically, or do they differ in certain ways in terms of behavior, in terms of other attributes?
I mean, of course, there's variation, right? They have different uh, evolutionary niches. So some are migratory. They fly thousands of kilometers south for the winter and all that.
Right.
Um, so they of course have to have some kind of navigation system that works over very long distances.
Right.
So the species that I studied the most was a non-migratory species. So they were kind of simple in a way. They don't have any particular home. They just fly around, foraging, mating, whatever. So yeah, there's variation, and it comes right down to the eyes. Different butterfly species can see different different numbers of color. Um, yeah, a student in our lab actually found one that had 15 different types of photoreceptor in its
Right.
eye. So that means that they had, photoreceptors, nerve cells in the eye that could respond to 50 different wavelengths of light, 50 different colors, um,
Well.
which is a record out of insects. Like I said, humans have got, well, three cones, red, green, blue, plus rods, which are useful for low light vision. So that's four. Um, the all-time record holder for the whole world is of any animal that's been studied, as far as we know, is the mantis shrimp.
Okay.
Those are really, really crazy creatures. They're fascinating. If one believed in a creator, you'd wonder what the creator was thinking when he came up with those, because
Whoa.
they are nuts. And they've got 16. So the student in our lab just was one off the world record.
Wow. That's really
But yeah, so
fascinating.
so
Yeah.
there's a whole community of people who study mantis shrimps because they can see polarization, like I mentioned, of butterflies, but not. This gets a bit technical, but not only can they see linear polarization, they can see circular polarization.
Wow.
And I think I'm right in saying they're the only animal that's been convincingly demonstrated to do that. Some people claim that some beetles can, but I'm not sure I believe that. Um, and their eyes just look really weird, right? Because they've got
Hmm.
two distinct hemispheres and then this mid band going across the equator, which has got 6 rows of highly specialized facets that house this astonishing array of different types of photoreceptors. So it's kind of one dimensional. They've got this one line of vision, and they actually move. Their eyes are on stalks, so they move their eyes, scanning kind of up and down to scan
Okay,
the world with this one dimensional array. Really fascinating stuff.
that's crazy. So, are you able to measure the field of view as well?
Yeah, I mean that's a fairly simple sort of psychophysical experiment you can do. You know, especially if you're doing like electrophysiology,
Okay.
you can record the activity of one photoreceptor, and from that you can just present a point of light in different places, and in that way work out kind of what its angular acceptance is, and then repeat that for the whole eye, and you can work
Hmm.
out what their field of view is.
All right.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of insects can see more or less a full panorama, like maybe
Hmm.
not quite 360 degrees, but close, like 300 plus degrees. Um, so again, in terms of resolution, in terms of acuity, even the best insects have terrible eyesight compared to us. We are very visual animals.
Yeah.
Um, but, they have this wide coverage of the entire surround, and, with all this different color information, different polarization information. Yeah.
All right. That's really fascinating. That's fascinating. Wow, didn't know insects had so much. They could see so much, and they could. There's quite
Yeah, and the one
complex.
thing I haven't mentioned yet is that they can see so much faster than we can as well. Our eyes are incredibly
All right.
sluggish. If you're watching a video, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, an old a movie is 24 frames a second.
Yeah.
A modern game is 60 frames per second. And 60 frames per second looks completely smooth to most humans.
Yeah.
But if you're an insect, forget it. Butterflies can detect flicker up to 100 frames a second easily.
Whoa.
And then if you look at like dragonflies, I mean, dragonflies are kind of the champions here because they're
Right.
aerial predators. Right? They hover around and catch things on the wing, so they've got to have
Ah.
extremely
Right.
fast vision.
So
So
that
they can go up to about
explains.
300
Yeah.
hertz.
300 hertz. Whoa.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like better than watching a television, I guess. The refresh rate.
totally. A TV
Yeah.
would just look like a slideshow to a dragonfly.
Wow. Dragonflies. Right. They're the sort of insects to study, I guess. I mean, the
Yeah, but because they are they're like the eagle or the falcon of the insect world, right? An aerial predator.
right.
So those birds have incredibly sharp vision, as we know, and although dragonflies don't have incredibly sharp vision, they do have incredibly fast vision, and they have comparatively sharp vision for an insect.
Have you studied the flight, the configuration, how it flutters its wings and how it stays afloat and it glides around? Has anyone done study on that stuff?
Um, yeah, I mean, so I haven't. That's almost kind of more in the realm of physics than biology, or it's biophysics anyway. Because you need to really know your aerodynamics and things to work on that, which I don't. Right? That's not my area at all.
Right.
Um, Not a huge amount has been done on butterflies, to my knowledge. A
Mm-hmm.
lot more has been done on flies. I mean, just in general, flies are very well studied because the fruit fly is kind of the standard genetic model organism
Yeah.
for various kind of quirks of history. People have been studying fruit flies for a century.
Yeah.
Um, so that's been studied quite well, and then larger flies, especially there's some that do kind of pursuit. The male pursues the female, which is quite a tricky, you know, aeronautical kind of task, right? To this aerial pursuit. So that's been studied quite well. And you may have heard people saying that, according to physics, bees shouldn't be able to fly. I don't know if you've heard that.
Yeah, I have some
Right. I mean,
idea.
I don't fully understand this either, but I think the basic point is, by kind of conventional Newtonian physics,
Yeah.
their wings are not big enough to generate enough lift for their big bodies. So what it actually is is as they beat their wings, they're creating all these kind of vortices and air currents
Yeah.
around the edge of the wing, which kind of magnifies the effect. So there's this
Yeah.
dynamic effect that, well, if you think about how the air is being perturbed by the movement of the wing, it actually kind of increases the effective area of the wing, allowing them to stay airborne. So
Hmm.
it's not exactly true to say like science has no idea how they can fly, but there is some truth to that. That kind of classical science would
Oh,
predict they
right.
wouldn't be able to get off the ground. Yeah, and it's because they are kind of deceptively simple. That's why I got interested in them because mammals they're so complicated.
Yeah.
Their lifespans are so much longer. There's ethical concerns. Whereas insects, they're you can do whatever you want. Nobody cares about being cruel to insects.
All right.
And like a fruit fly, like its life cycle lasts 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So you can do all sorts of experiments that would be completely infeasible to do with mammals because you have such a fast turnover.
Yeah.
Um, so even though they are so quote unquote simple, um, with these tiny brains with a few 100,000 neurons, you can still do these very sophisticated behaviors. I mean, bees, okay, you're only up to about 1 million neurons. You're talking about a bee,
Yeah.
but still, that's 5 orders of magnitude less than a human.
Hmm.
And they can learn, they can communicate. Um, you can do a lot with a little. And I think if you're interested in intelligence, artificial intelligence, then I think that's a really good place to look.
All right. Yeah, that's really fascinating. Insects. Do you think insects are indigenous to this planet, or you think at least some of them might be, or do you think then they might have come from another planet in the distant past?
I mean, there is that hypothesis, right? Was it panspermia or something that
Yeah.
maybe no life is indigenous to this planet. Maybe it all came in on an asteroid or something.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows, right? I can say for sure that, well, not for sure, but I can say with high degree of confidence that they have been evolving on this planet for hundreds of millions of years.
Yeah.
But what happened before that? Who knows? And I mean, this is a wacky theory. I'm not saying I believe this, but if I had to pick any animal that I think might be an alien,
Yeah.
I would say cephalopods, octopuses and squids,
All right.
because they are really weird.
Yes. A lot of people have been saying that.
Well, I mean, they have the same basic, DNA. They have the same amino acids and things that all other animals do. So that would be kind of one strike against that theory. But
Yeah.
they do seem very weird, very kind of far
Yeah.
removed from other things. I mean,
Hmm.
because so eyes, vision is my area, so I know about their eyes.
Yeah.
And I don't know, people talk about like creationists often talk about the eye as being too perfect to have been, evolved. It must be an intelligent designer. But
Yeah.
actually, our eyes are very poorly designed because the photosensitive part is at the back of the retina, and all the blood vessels and other crap that's needed just for maintenance is in front of it, blocking the light,
Yeah.
which is a really stupid way to design an eye. So
Oh.
that's a good argument against intelligent design straight away. But
Uh huh.
that's besides the point. The point is that squids and octopuses have similar types of eyes to us, right? They don't have compound eyes like insects,
Yeah.
but their retinas are the correct way around. So they must have independently evolved that. There's no way you could just flip a retina 180 like that. So it must have just evolved completely separately, and theirs did it the right way. So it's a completely separate lineage um, that's been evolving kind of on its own for a long time.
Right. Or they probably had a separate intelligent designer. I hope.
Well, maybe. Yeah, maybe you want to talk about them being intelligently designed.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many theories going around. Nobody really knows for sure, but it's quite
Yeah,
fascinating.
it's fun to think about these things, and I always like to keep an open mind.
Yeah,
You never know.
definitely. That's right. Um, yeah. Well, I think I've used enough of your time. Thanks a lot for coming out and talking about all your
Thank you so much for
research.
having me. It's
Oh, it's a pleasure,
been
man.
a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, it's it's fun. That's what it's all about. you're gonna have fun doing this. Maybe next time we'll talk some sci-fi and spice it up a bit with aliens and stuff like
Yeah, spin out.
that. That's great. Thanks everyone for watching, and I shall see you next time. Please subscribe to the channel, and goodbye. I- All right, I think that's we just
All
covered
right,
that. Yeah, and nice and short.
great.